Tai ką, važiuojam?
I wanted to skip this one, but there's some tank stuff in it, so I couldn't do it. But the first half is all plot. You do, though, get the backstory of why Miho was being so cringy about tankery. At the last tournament she was in at her old school, she lost her team the match because she went to help some people not drown and her family disowned her for it. I personally think in a sport that's supposedly safe as tankery, that if you see someone in real danger, you'd be commended to go help them, but apparently that doesn't apply. You need to be in the way of shells that aren't going to hurt you. But in the flashback, the number on the turret of the Tiger tank she is in is 217, which is the turret number of tank ace Otto Carius, who was a Tiger tank commander in World War II. Then there's another 20 minutes of plot and practicing until the team goes looking for more tanks to beef up their numbers.
Tiger tas, kur buvo, man iš tikrųjų vienas gal iš labiausiai patinkančių tankų, bet man labiau patinka Mauzas ir Tiger 2 ir Ferdinand. Oh crap. Tokį pamiršau vieną dalyką. I am a professional YouTuber.
And in the process, they kind of explain the school aircraft carriers.
Why are we on a ship? To produce highly trained individuals capable of excelling in any field.
Miho and Hana find a 75
Good memes.
KWK-40 L-43 high-velocity cannon for the Panzer IV that will upgrade it from a D model to an F2 model. In reality, this move was made in 1942 by the German army to move the Panzer IV from an infantry support role to
Pala.
the Panzer IV. That will
Matot šitą medį? Aš ant War Thunder, ant kažkurio tanko esu jį užsidėjęs tik tais be to Nazi symbol.
From a D model to an F2 model. In reality, this move was made in 1942 by the German army to move the Panzer IV from an infantry support role to an anti-tank role to take on the heavier Soviet vehicles. The History Club in Yukuri then find a French Char V tank in the river. Used by the French from 1936 to 1940, this tank made its name during the battle for France in 1940.
Ilgas tankas, bet lėtas.
It did have some large shortcomings. Namely, its abysmal speed of 24 kilometers an hour or 17 miles an hour.
24 km per valandą.
And the sign next to it when it is found may be a reference to that.
Maximum of 60 millimeter of armor, 75 millimeter and 47 millimeter guns. Guess it's better than the Type 89.
Surroused in Japan.
They then journey into the ship to find the lost freshman team using a compass and in a closed metal space, somehow. What? What the fuck? And in the process find a Porsche Tiger, but more on that later. The episode closes with them completely skipping over the match against the Italians, because the Italians are never going to live down their World War II performance and is remembered only to be a meme in history. But they show a few of their tanks for a second.
Rossi.
This episode begins with Katusha, the leader of the Russian team, meeting with Darjeeling, which may be a reference to Stalin and Churchill meeting in Moscow in 1942 to discuss At this, Darjeeling spouts some more deep bullshit while Mini Stalin acts as Russian as she possibly can. You go to Gulag. The Nutcracker suite by Tchaikovsky plays in the background. The Panzer IV is shown to have been upgraded and a crew is assigned to the Char B. This tank, though, is also understaffed, with a crew of 4 and only having 3. With the commander, who also works as the loader and gunner for the 37mm in the turret, a loader for the 75mm in the hull, a driver, who also aims and fires the 75mm in the hull, and a radio operator. On the Girls and Panzer wiki, they explained this by saying the commander also works the radio, and although the radio position on the Char B was right under the commander, the French added this extra man because the commander could not be expected to spend a lot of his time crouched on the floor when he was supposed to command the tank. French tank design is very strange. Later, the student council meets with Miho and says this.
We passed a latitude of 50 degrees north.
The 50th parallel is about where Russia starts on the map of the globe. You then see Miho plan for the match, where you hear her say,
Prov is pretty good on the counterattack after all.
Referencing the slew of successful counterattacks pulled off by the Red Army during the war. We then see Orai right before the match, where Miho mentions putting Winterkitten on their tank. These were track extensions put on Panzer III's and IV's tracks in the winter in Russia to help with traction in the snow, and were used widely on the Eastern Front. You then formally
Labai
meet the
gerai
Russian
idėja.
team. Their name Pravda is a reference to the official
Dabar bus
newspaper of the
pats
Soviet
blogiausias
Communist Party
garsas, tai
published
jeigu
throughout the
norit
USSR,
tiesiog
and their
praskipti
leader's name,
kokią
Katusha,
20
is a reference to a Soviet marching song from the time of the war. Katusha herself arrives in a truck
Va.
armed with launchers
Dabar
called
gali
Katusha rockets,
prasukti, jeigu
which were used to strike
nemėgstat
terror
šito
into
garso.
German soldiers. I mean, just listen to them. Fuck that. We then get our first look at Pravda's tanks, including an IS-2, the Soviets' answer to the big cats that the Germans were producing, that when developed mid-war was a huge shock to the Wehrmacht when it debuted in 1944. Second, we see a KV-2, a heavy tank meant to be an offensive weapon to destroy concrete emplacements, but saw success against German panzers during the initial invasion of Russia in 1941. Seriously, go look up the battles the KV-2s were in. They're insane and what Wikipedia was meant for. I also made my own video on the KV-2 if you want to check it out. The rest of the team is composed of T-34s, which were the backbone of the Russian armored force in World War II. You see both T-34-76s, which were early war models, and T-34-85s, which were a mid-war upgrade that increased the turret size for a bigger cannon and another crew member so the commander could focus on commanding the tank and not do double duty. They then charged to and the show's rendition of the song Katusha, the aforementioned Russian marching song. Orai decides to attack head-on, and it goes about as well as expected, with the Sharbi having some trouble in what I imagine is a reference to its slow speed. There's also a Stalingrad reference, because it's required when you have a battle in the snow. After taking out a couple T-34s, Orai is surrounded in a pincer movement. I feel like I've seen this before.
Run.
And Orai retreats into a church with the panzer full
Tiger
bouncing
pirmas.
shells that it probably shouldn't bounce. Katusha then asks for surrender under a white flag
O,
and
mano
Monaco girl quotes
mėgstamiausia dar
General
viena
McCulloch
dalis.
Bastogne.
Please surrender.
Nuts!
But everybody's pretty bummed out about it. But then the student council informs everybody the school will be shut down if they lose the tournament, and everyone is even more bummed out. But you'll never guess who wins. Oh my god, maybe it's the main characters, I don't know. After a plot flashback, we see everyone is stuck in the church under the Russian siege, freezing. The Stalingrad references are very direct. Miho rallies everyone with a rousing speech, and they begin to plan their breakout. Katusha is seen sleeping in a Soviet RF-8 fan-driven snowmobile, as Nona sings the Cossack Lullaby to her. The RF-8 was developed in 1942 and was often used in reconnaissance
Dar vienas dalykas, aš noriu jūsų paklausti, ar man daryti savo anime cracked versioną, nes aš tikrai, nepyksiu, tikrai galiu padaryti, bet šitas video turi surinkt maksimum 12 laikų. Gerai, varom toliau.
activities for the Red Army and to support the ski troops. Miho sends cosplay girl Yakuri to do recon, and we are treated to this.
Marching in the snow and treading the ice. We can't tell what was a river or what was a road. The forest collapses, but we can't leave it behind. Everywhere we go, we're in the midst of the enemy.
Now what they are trying to sing sounds like this. Now, I guess this doesn't translate very well, but I would think you could at least, have the two of their voices sync up or something. I don't see why they took take one and were just like, yeah, that'll do. Anyways, this song, which roughly translates to Snowy March, is a Japanese marching song recounting a veteran's feelings after the battle of, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, between the Japanese Empire and the Chinese Empire in the First Sino-Japanese War. Also, Mako and one of the Helmet Girls do some recon to spot tanks, and this is said.
It's a Stalin, too.
JS2.
Now, I always call this tank an IS-2, but it all comes down on how you pronounce Stalin's name. If you pronounce it like this, it's a JS-2. But if you pronounce it like this, which is closer to the Russian pronunciation, it's an IS-2. Neither are wrong, but I see people get into arguments over this all the time. Everyone gets back, and there are more Stalingrad references.
Any more food? We didn't expect the situation, so we gave out the soup and only have crackers left. We don't have anything left to eat.
Also, the History Club references the Hakoda Mountains incident, where in 1902, 193 men of the Imperial Japanese Army froze to death on an excursion, and it has since been observed as one of the worst mountaineering disasters in human history. Miho rallies the team with some cringe, and the plot armor covers the breakout. If only Paulus had plot armor.
You just have to say that you're fine when you're not really
line. Ori charges at Pravda, destroying a few T-34s in the process, provoking a chase. And the 38T goes ham before being knocked out. After things settle down, Yukuri runs into a tower and finds the enemy flag tank that quickly runs off. The M3 Lee is knocked out as Ori runs into and kills the KV-2. The Char B is killed, and after some chase, the Pravda flag tank is destroyed, winning Ori the match. Pravda is out, and Mini Stalin loses her composure faster than real Stalin when the Germans came knocking. Also, I would count a tank's track being shot out as a knockout in this sport, but plot. The student council plans for the next match.
Oh my god.
Being shot out as a knockout.
Vikšro neteko. Jeigu matot, va čia va, šitas tankas neturi vikšro. Čia vikšras, čia ne vikšras.
Knockout in this sport, but plot. The student council plans for the next match and decides to look for more tanks. We then see the automotive club has repaired the previously found Porsche Tiger, which in reality was the competing design to Henschel's that later went into production. It had a list of failings and was really a very poor tank, and the show references this. If you want to know more about the Porsche Tiger, I actually did a full video on it. Check it out in the link below if you're interested. Also, Yukuri's my spirit animal.
It pains you to call the tank, doesn't it?
It might have a bad belt system design, but its 88mm cannon is really powerful.
The various teams then go looking for more tanks. The student council upgrades their 38T into a Hetzer. But in reality, the Hetzer's development was not this simple. Despite the appearance, the Hetzer was not simply built on the existing 38T chassis design. It simply took advantage of the parts already being manufactured for the already existing medium tank. The Hetzer was wider, had a modified suspension, and an upgraded engine, just to name a few changes. Also, there is little to no evidence the name Hetzer was actually used by German crews, and is most likely a post-war name. The Germans just called it a Jagdpanzer 38T. With the modification, though, the student council team is still understaffed, still needing a loader. They also add side armor skirting to the Panzer IV hull and turret called Schürzen, which technically upgrades it to an H model. Although in the production runs for Panzer IV H's, there were various other changes made, such as the deletion of the side hull vision ports to ease production. The team then finds a Japanese Type 3 Chai Nu to add to the team. The Type 3 was an upgraded version of the Type 97 Chai
Dabar aš jums
incorporating a long...
paskaityti, kas čia parašyta. Atleiskit, kad negalėjau surasti jokių nuotraukų per laiko periodą. Tai štai dalykas, tai so here's, tai štai šiek tiek nuobodžių nuotraukų atleiskit.
75mm gun and a larger turret ring, making it one of the largest tanks the Japanese built. But as with most Japanese tanks developed late in the war, it was retained for the defense of the home islands and never saw service. It's decided the automotive club will crew the Porsche Tiger, and that leaves this tank understaffed as well, with 4 crew needing 5, a commander, loader, gunner, driver, and radio operator. A new team is recruited for the Type 3, made up of 3 people who met online playing a tank game. What could that possibly be? This team creates the most understaffed tank crew so far, though, with 3 members needing 5. A commander, loader, gunner, driver, and radio operator. And if you're wondering the reason I harp on this, it's because the tanks from all the other schools are always seen being crewed to capacity.
Dar prie sakiau, taigi visi, kitų šalių tank šitą komandos gali turėti tik tais tos šalies tankus. O šita, komanda gali turėti bet kokius tankus. Ir be to, jeigu iš tikrųjų pažiūrėsi čia pačioj, jis gali suprasti, kad čia yra vokiečių simbolis. Aš iš tikrųjų šitą senai žinau, bet kaip padarė mymą, galima sakyti, oh my god.
So this seems like a strange rusus
turi,
to take away from the very spot-on historical accuracy
vokiečių
of all the
turi.
visuals in the show. Anyways, then there's some plot.
Oh,
The night
okay.
before the match, all the teams hang out together. In the dub, you are treated to this gem.
We'll win.
And the freshman team is seen watching Kelly's Heroes, with one of the Tiger scenes recreated scene for scene. The next day, the teams arrive for the finals, and there's a full-blown tank convention going on. I would cover the references, but there are many, and I've covered a lot of them in the past. The British, Americans, and Russians come by to wish Ori good luck, with Mini Stalin telling Miho to
Crush Koromori Mine like Operation Bagration did.
Operation Bagration was a Soviet offensive launched on June 22nd, 1944 that utterly destroyed the German Army Group Center. In fact, destroyed might be an understatement. The Army Group Center pretty much ceased to exist. We then see the enemy team, Koromori Mine, or the Germans. Miho mentions that the Germans
Will probably come attack us all at once the second the match starts.
which pretty much describes World War II in a nutshell, with a front-loaded German offensive that later gets bogged down into a attritional war they can't win. The German team features mostly mid to late war tanks, and holy fuck, there's a lot of them, so strap in. First you see a Jagdpanzer IV. This tank destroyer, developed in 1943 and based on the chassis of a Panzer IV, mounted the same 75mm L-70 gun as the Panther in the latter third of its production run. Although fairly reliable and effective, only around 900 were produced. Second is a Panther. Rushed into service in 1943, this tank was very unreliable early in its production run, but as the war drug on, various improvements were made that eventually...
Matot, tas pats simbolis kaip ir čia. Makes sense.
Earned it the title of one of the best tanks of the war, with good armor and the aforementioned deadly gun. Next, a Jagdpanther, the tank destroyer variant of the Panther, mounting the 88mm L-70 gun of the Tiger II. Although used to great success, very few of these were built as well due to late war production problems. Next is the Germans' final fielded submission to the heavy tank competition
King
with the
Tiger
Soviets,
arba
the
Tiger
Tiger
2.
II. First fielded in 1944, this tank, meant to be Hitler's wonder weapon, had a less than stellar performance in the field due to an underpowered engine and transmission. Then, a Jagdtiger, the Tiger II's tank destroyer variant armed with a massive 128mm PaK-44 L-55 gun. This is also the heaviest vehicle fielded in the war, weighing in at nearly 72 tons. It, though, was also plunged with mechanical problems and made little impact as it debuted so late in the war, being fielded even after the Tiger II. Then there is a Ferdinand tank destroyer, the thing the Porsche Tiger later became. And for more than you want to know about this vehicle, check out the link below. Lastly, there is a Tiger I. This German heavy tank debuted in 1942 and was a direct response to the heavier tanks the Germans ran into in France and Russia. It has since become the poster child for German tanks of World War II due to its deadly reputation. Also, this Tiger has the number 212 on its turret, which is the turret number for German tank ace Michael Wittmann. The Germans attacked quickly through the forest, prompting this line,
They used the forest as a shortcut?
which is a reference to the German invasion of France, where the German army sidestepped the Maginot Line, attacking through the Ardennes, a dense forest thought to be impassable by motorized divisions. The Type 3 is knocked out almost immediately, probably in reference to its short service life. And the episode ends with a cliffhanger.
Ir dar viena mano mėgstamiausia dalis.
With the Type 3
Dabar
out,
žiūrėkite
Ori
įdėmiai,
retreats looking for a
nes
better
kitaip
position while
duosiu
releasing
galvą
smoke to
špygą.
mask their movements. Eventually taking a position on a hill, the Germans follow. The Hetzer immobilizes the Jagdpanther and the Panther,
Pašovė
but this does little
Jagdpanterį,
to stop
va
the attack.
viršanoje.
The Germans charge up the hill, and a few vehicles do
Erika.
better with the incline than they should. Namely the Ferdinand, or Elephant, as this example is a late war refit model, and the Jagdtiger. Both had very underpowered drivetrains for their weight, which should give them a lot of trouble with the hill. Reports of Ferdinands at Kursk mention many vehicles being lost due to engine fires, and they became overstressed ascending a hill to get to a firing position. And Jagdtigers were being lost left and right at the end of the war due to transmission overstressing issues. So this scene is kind of a stretch. The Hetzer bullies the Jagdpanther.
Va. Matot, šitas pats tankas ir jo vikšą vėl nušoja ir paklausykite dabar.
Hooray. Get those fuck-off right tracks! God fucking damn!
And after a volley and some distraction by the Hetzer, Ori charges down the hill. Darjeeling says this,
They started using heavy tanks against Pravda, but it worked against them here.
which is a reference to the heavy tank arms race between the Soviet Union and Germany in World War II that ended up producing many of the tanks we see Koromori Mine use in the show. The Tiger II throws a track, giving Ori time to redeploy. Then there's a river crossing scene that's too long. Yukuri is seen spotting using an EM-R36 rangefinder, a German stereoscopic rangefinder from World War II. Ori crosses a bridge and heads towards the city where it encounters a Panzer III. But the Panzer III leads them into the German team's mouse tank.
Damn, boy. Damn, boy, he's thick. Boy,
He does,
that's a
boy.
thick-ass boy. Damn.
The Mouse was supposed to be the next step in the German heavy tank program. Weighing 188 tons, crowning it the title of the world's largest super heavy tank, and packing
World
the
of
same gun as
Tanks,
the Yag
North
Tiger,
America.
with an additional coaxial 75mm cannon. This thing was meant to be a bunker on tracks, impervious to all anti-tank guns it came across. However, this thing was little more than a pipe dream, with only 2 prototypes built that never saw service. If it did somehow manage to see service, though, I think it would have just made nice target practice for Sturmovik pilots, as the thing was incredibly impractical and slow. In the perfect world of the show, though, it is quite the force to be reckoned with. The Char B attempts to kill it and is promptly destroyed.
What a fool you are.
Šovė su savo 2 kulkom ir nepramušė, ir dabar klausykitės.
I'm a god. How can you kill a god?
Mauzas atseit dievas. Rest in peace.
The Stug is also killed as Ori retreats to the Germans advancing to the Panzer lead.
Bet man kas keista, kad Tiger pirmas turi vėliavėlę, kurią reikia, tą tanką reikia sunaikinti ir laimėsi, bet Mausas vos net esi pats šarvuotiškiausias tankas ir vos ne, nežinau, čia bus toks kaip mini spastai.
Premium tier plot armor allows the mouse to be taken out, even though Ori probably could have just outrun and ignored it, and the German team makes it into the city. The Hetzer dies from damage, and the lead takes out the elephant with a shot to the rear, and this was kind of foreshadowed with the scene from Kelly's Heroes that the freshmen were watching in the previous episode. The Yag Tiger takes out the Lee right before falling into a ditch, and the Porsche Tiger blocks off the route for most of the German team to get to Miho, leaving 1 enemy Tiger in the Panzer IV, both of which are flag tanks, to duel it out one-on-one. The Porsche Tiger bounces a lot of shells that it probably wouldn't, especially at that range, before eventually being taken out, but it buys Miho enough time to have a Need for Speed-style chase with the enemy Tiger and eventually taking it out, winning Ori the match, even though the Ori flag tank was once again immobilized. Everyone celebrates, there's some plot, and the show ends with a parade.
Taigi čia galima sakyti pabaiga, bet yra dar viena dalis, tiksliau dar 2. Taigi, leiskit peržiūrėti, gerai, atsiprašau. Padarysiu ir kitą dalį, jeigu taip labai nori.
Yay!
Luna! Clara! You can't speak Russian on the battlefield!
We can finish them if we charge now.
Yes, charging in is what we do!
That's right, because it always works. Mako, start going as if you're trying to run away but can't quite make it.
What does that even mean?
Some of you may remember that the history behind Girls in Panzer was one of the first real series I did here, if you could even call it that, and in celebration of 100,000 subs, / reaching the Patreon goal, / all of the comments, I have decided to finally do the history behind their film. But beforehand, I will reiterate my disclaimer from the original videos to the skeptics. I am really not an anime fan. In fact, this is the only series I have ever watched. And I will say that, objectively, the premise is very stupid. But I keep coming back to it because there are layers and layers of good historical references made in it, and you can tell the people who made it really cared. Even certain tank gods. And also, even with how stupid some of the physics are, it's just really fun to watch. And before you watch this one, if you haven't yet, I recommend you watch my historical analysis on the series first, because there's a lot of references and tanks explained there that I'm not going to mention here because I've already done them. I'll be focusing on elements that are more new to the movie. Also, a fair bit of the movie itself is just plot, which I'll probably just mostly skip over because it's not historical, and to be honest, the plot is kind of garbage. Also, I managed to find a dub of the movie for the clips, which I'm sure you'll all be very happy about.
Yay!
The film opens with the British team, St. Gloriana's, taking cover
Aš jūsų dabar paklausiu. Šitas tankas neturi šaudymo mechanizmo. Čia, ką patranka nori pasakyti padaryti tik dėl grožio, nes nėra jokio šaudymo mechanizmo.
The film opens with the British team, St. Gloriana's, taking cover in a sand trap on a golf course surrounded by Ori in a post-tournament exhibition match of combined high school teams as the Finns watch from afar. More on them later. A referee Yokosuka P1Y plane is seen overhead watching the match. It is then that we meet a new team, Chiitan Academy, or the Japanese. This team sports mostly early variant Type 97 Chiha tanks. The Type 97 was designed in 1936 as an improvement on the Type 95 Light, and saw many of the same features such as the bell crank suspension used on it. It was the second most produced tank by the Imperial Japanese Army in World War II, and saw service on all fronts till the end of the war. There are also a few Type 95 Ha-Go tanks, which was the Japanese interpretation of the 7-ton Light seen popping up in many countries in the early 30s. During the war, especially up against the US and Red armies, these tanks fared very poorly against newer, heavier vehicles, as these were meant to be infantry tanks to support the infantry, and the Japanese didn't really care too much about heavy armor or large guns on them, as Japan's main focus during their development was on China, a country with no significant tank force. For more information on this, and the Ha-Go in particular, check out the video I did on the inside of the Ha-Go tank. Miho orders the Orai and Chiitan force to advance, which, after a bit, the Japanese interpret as an order for an all-out charge Banzai style. And it's fun to see the Japanese have a sense of humor about themselves and continue the running gag of school cultural stereotypes. 2 Matilda IIs are taken out, along with most of the Japanese team, and the British are able to escape once their allies, the Russians, come and relieve them. Coming from the other side are a handful of Mark VI Crusader tanks led by fan-favorite Rosehip. The Crusader was an early to mid-war cavalry tank, boasting ridiculous speeds of up to 40 miles per hour, making them excellently suited for the deserts in the North African campaign. However, these tanks were plagued with mechanical problems, which became their Achilles heel. By the time these issues were sorted out, though, the tank was outclassed. The show, though, really plays to their speed with some ridiculous maneuvers pulled off by it. Orai quickly finds itself surrounded and falls back to the city as the Finns judge them. There is then a long chase with multiple British and Russian tanks being lost, along with a few from Orai. The funniest one being the M3 Lee being killed by Nona's IS-2. Damn, Nona's a cold bitch. And I guess I'll address this now. All the tanks are once again moving way too fast. You have infantry tanks speeding along with cavalry tanks at certain points. I know I mentioned this in my videos on the series, but the movie cranks the speed factor up to 10. The girl in the Ha-Go hits her head on a World of Tanks reference when venturing into a no-fire zone, and there's a reference to Episode 3 with the Matilda on the lift. The KV-2 makes a short appearance before falling over and destroying itself right next to a D-Day reference, and the battle ends with Orai defeated when the Panzer IV flag tank is taken out after a bit more chase, and the Finns continue to judge from afar. Then there's a fan service scene, because anime, where the characters discuss the coming semester. At the end, though, the president is called away and we are presented with the rising action of the story, which is basically this guy, Tankery Hitler, going back on his promise to keep Orai
Tankery Hitler. Heil Hitler.
open if they won the high school tankery tournament in the series. So now the school's getting shut down again. Also, it's weird to see a guy in this series. I felt they just had some kind of female mitosis thing going on in this universe. On a side note, I can kind of see why the next series is the final one, because the writers of this series only do one story. Their series and film are the exact same story with a couple details changed around, and the finale is pretty close to the same thing too. I'm still gonna watch it all though. All the crews go to tell their tanks goodbye as the Ministry of Education is set to take them all. But right in time, the Americans swoop in a Lockheed C-5M Super Galaxy transport plane and secure the tanks as if they were...
Visus tankus norėjo paimti iš tos komandos, bet čia buvo truputka prieš tai sorry, kad nepasakiau.
Oil or something. They take Orai's tanks to keep them out of the Ministry of Education's hands in an operation dubbed I Shall Return, which is the quote from Douglas MacArthur upon his being forced out of the Philippines by the Japanese in 1941. The next day, everyone leaves the ship and it sails away to be decommissioned. Everyone is loaded onto buses and they are taken to a holding area. That night, Saunders returns with Orai's tanks, airdropping them down in Operation I Have Returned, the words of Douglas MacArthur when he retook the Philippines in 1944. The next bit is a lot of plot, but there are some good references hidden inside, including Yukari cooking with German mess equipment next to a Zelt, and the History Club playing a military strategy game that looks like it's about the North African campaign. Miho and the gang head into town in the Panzer IV and stop to visit Nightmare Land. And that and this person become important later. Also, Yukari is my spirit animal.
For a guy named Punchy, he sure gets punched a lot.
Back in reality, the president attempts negotiations with Tankery Hitler, and over a few scenes with some help from other characters, is able to convince the Federation to let Ori fight against a college team to keep their school. As this is going on, Miho goes home, where you find out her and Maho are actually friends, and that her mother still holds a grudge against her for saving someone instead of winning a sport. There's then a flashback scene with a Panzer II, an early war German tank that saw service on all fronts with multiple variants produced, and was seen as the workhorse of the German army from 1939 through 40. Miho's mother meets with the mother of the leader of the university team they will be fighting, set to clips of University Shermans driving through a field of destroyed Panthers from another school as they discuss the match. The president returns to camp and tells everyone about the match, to much joy from the others, but worries about how few tanks they have, and that it's an annihilation match. Ori seems to have an out, though, as the other teams are seen traveling, with the British school on their ship, the Americans flying their C-5, the Russians traveling on a Zubar-class LCAC, a large fan-driven landing craft from the late 80s, the Germans in an LZ-217 Graf Zeppelin, the Japanese on a train, and the Finns in the forest, because of course they are.
Venice.
All sending and receiving communications about a tea party they are invited to attend. At the qualification, the other schools provide additional troops and tanks, including a Tiger I and II and 2 Panthers from the Germans, various Shermans from the Americans, 2 T-3485s, an IS-2 and a KV-2 from the Russians, a Churchill, Matilda II, and Crusader from the British, a CV-33 from the Italians, a BT-42 from the Finns, and multiple Type 97 and Type 95 from the Japanese. The leaders from each team meet in a tent to discuss strategy, and Mini Stalin makes a Cold War reference, with Maho shooting her down. Each commander also makes a joke about what their attack plan would be according to the stereotype of their country's army. After this, we formally meet the enemy, the All-Stars University team, who are essentially a post-war UN team consisting of mostly M26 Pershings. The Pershing was the Americans' answer to the heavy tanks popping up in late World War II from the Germans.
Kaip šita daina turėtų būti. Taip va turėtų skambėti. Grįžtam prie klipo.
And the Soviets, and didn't see much service in World War II, but did in Korea. The design supported an excellent 90mm gun and good armor, but it suffered from reliability problems for most of its life. They also have a few M24 Chaffee light tanks. Built as a replacement for the Stuart, the Chaffee also saw limited service in World War II, as they could not be fielded in significant numbers in time, but saw service in Korea and are currently in service still in Uruguay. The command tank is a Centurion Mark I, a British post-war tank considered by many to be the first MBT. Although it missed World War II, Centurions were in service until the late 80s, seeing its heaviest service also in Korea. It was also, in my opinion, the only good British design during World War II, and it didn't even make World War II. Proceed to fight in the comments over that statement. The match begins with both teams moving forward, scouting for each other. Now this battle is nearly an hour long, and a total clusterfuck of stuff going on. So instead of going through it blow by blow, because that would be boring, I'll briefly mention the bigger things and focus more on the references. But if you haven't, you definitely should watch it. Regardless of how inaccurate it is, it's just super fun to watch. The first action takes place in the woods, as the university team attempts to encircle Ori, and it goes very well for them.
Reporting damage to both the left and right tracks. Artillery's breaking initiation alert.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
The center of Ori's force makes it to the top of a hill, where this happens, much to everyone's confusion. Yukari thinks it's a Sturm Tiger. To the top of a hill, where...
Fuck this
Man atrodo, vairuotojai, žiūrėkit, va. Pogalais leiskit susikalpuoti ir žiūrėk radiją.
The center of Ori's force makes it to the top of a hill, where this happens, much to everyone's confusion. Yukari thinks it's a Sturm Tiger, and the tanks are sent out to investigate. The hill force retreats, and in their chase, Clara and Nona go to the Great Gulag in the sky.
Miss Katusha, it's been an honor to fight alongside you. Surprise!
Wait, nobody dies in this sport. Why is Stalin so upset? The scout tanks soon find out that the large explosions were caused by a large Karl Garat mortar, a German 600mm siege mortar mounted on a mobile chassis. Although impressive, these weapons were very impractical during the war and saw limited service. They required large crews to man and defend and were extremely difficult to get from place to place, and they were mostly a large morale booster for German troops in the field. The scout tanks hatch a plan to kill it, with the BT-42 providing support. The BT-42 was a Finnish modification of Soviet BT-7 light tanks, adding a bigger turret and gun, and made in limited numbers. Now, as ridiculous and awesome as the BT scene is, it is made with the history of the vehicle in mind, namely in two parts, the first being the large jump it made. The world record for longest jump made by a tank was made by a Soviet BT, so this is probably a reference to that. But with the BT-42 being heavier, I doubt it could make this, but that is what it's referring to. The second is it driving on its road wheels. The BT tanks did have this feature to shift the drive to its wheels when the tracks were taken, but this was a bit of a process and didn't happen this quickly. After taking out a few Pershings that it probably couldn't, the BT is killed and the Hetzer makes a jump it could not make to kill the car. The battle then heads into a military-themed amusement park, and there are a ton of references within, including a Thomas the Tank version of a tortoise, a rat, and there are a ton of references within, including a Thomas the Tank version of a tortoise, a rat,
Раты. Томай, что? Раты?
a V-2 rocket, and a little fortified house called the Maginot House, in reference to the Maginot Line.
Oh. GG, France.
Just to name a few. The university team arrives and a lot of fighting ensues, most notably with the T-20...
Oh, te devim penke. Sunkias svores tankas.
8 Super Heavy tank. This 100-ton American assault gun was developed late in the
100
war to deal with the Siegfried Line on the German border. The idea was it would punch through the German defenses, and the Germans would be unable to kill it in the process. However, the Siegfried Line had already been overrun by the time it passed its trials, and it was never used. The Japanese team are seen hiding and waiting for the enemy to pass them before they attack, in reference to Japanese late-war strategy in the Pacific of letting American troops land and move inland a bit before opening fire to maximize casualties. The university team manages to herd Ori into one spot and anime ensues. Then there's a lot of street fighting where the teams are whittled down, mostly by Alice going ham. To the Tiger 1 and Panzer...
Kaip greitai užtaisinėja tą tanką? 8 kulkas per 8
or against the
sekundės.
Centurion.
Taip,
There's
per
a
sekundę
ridiculous
užtaiso
chase
vieną
scene that's
kulką.
basically Tokyo Drift, where Alice hesitates because she sees a bear, and Miho is able to claim victory. The Tiger tows the Panzer IV back, and everyone celebrates. Well, there it is, and I hope this video at least somewhat lived up to your expectations of the months of requests.
Yra dar viena dalis, bet... No! 12 laikų ir darom kitą dalį. Taigi, ačiū, kad žiūrėjot, jums gero ir tikiuosi, kad jums patiko. Ir goodbye.